Some sentences take your freedom, others take everything else. In the United States, there are prisons where the punishment is not measured by years, but by endurance. Facilities where survival is not guaranteed, rehabilitation is irrelevant. And the system operates with an understanding that many who enter will never leave whole if they leave at all. This is not about crime statistics or sensational headlines. This is about destinations, because in the American prison system, where you are sent can matter far more than how long you are sentenced to. People can receive the same punishment on paper and experience entirely different realities behind the walls. Some prisons are built to house, others are built to contain, and a select few are built to wear people down. These are the worst prisons to be sentenced into. From the outside, many appear ordinary, concrete complexes surrounded by razor wire watchtowers standing silent against the sky. But inside, conditions are shaped by policies that prioritize control above all else. In these places, daily life is defined by restriction, unpredictability, and constant psychological pressure. The environment itself becomes part of the sentence. Movement is limited to rigid schedules or eliminated entirely. Communication is controlled, monitored, or discouraged. Silence is enforced not just through rules, but through architecture. Thick concrete walls, narrow corridors, and sealed doors reduce sound, visibility, and connection. Human interaction becomes a security risk. In the most severe facilities, prisoners spend the majority of their time alone, not as a temporary disciplinary measure, but as a standard condition of confinement. Cells are small, often windowless, or designed to prevent meaningful views of the outside world. Artificial light replaces sunlight. The passage of time becomes abstract. Days lose shape. Weeks blur. Years stretch without milestones. This level of isolation was not always common. Historically, American prisons emphasized containment with some degree of communal activity. Over time, however, fear-driven policy shifts and high-profile incidents led to the expansion of extreme confinement models. The solution to violence became separation. The solution to risk became isolation. What followed was the rise of facilities designed not just to hold people, but to eliminate unpredictability altogether. Every movement scheduled, every behavior monitored, every variable reduced. These prisons operate on the assumption that control prevents chaos. But control at this scale comes with consequences. The human brain relies on stimulation, interaction, and environmental feedback to maintain stability. When those elements are removed, cognitive and emotional systems begin to deteriorate. This is not theory, it is documented reality. Studies conducted over decades consistently show that prolonged isolation leads to anxiety, depression, paranoia, hallucinations, and emotional numbing. The longer the exposure, the deeper the impact. Yet in some American prisons, isolation is not short-term, it is indefinite. Placement into these facilities is often justified by classification systems that label individuals as high-risk or disruptive, but once assigned, removal is rare. Progression depends on behavioral evaluations that can be influenced by the very psychological damage isolation causes. The system becomes circular. Symptoms of distress are interpreted as defiance. Defiance justifies further restriction. Restriction deepens the damage. In the worst prisons, there is no clear path out of this cycle. Oversight is limited. External monitoring may occur sporadically, but daily operations are largely shielded from public view. Policies are enforced internally, reviewed internally, and justified internally. Transparency is minimal. What happens inside these facilities rarely reaches the outside world unless it escalates into crisis lawsuits, deaths, or rare investigative reports. Even then, details are often obscured by legal language and administrative framing. The reality is reduced to numbers, incidents are logged, grievances are processed, statistics are compiled. The lived experience disappears into paperwork. For those sentenced into these prisons, the adjustment is immediate and severe. There is no gradual transition. Personal belongings are restricted. Communication privileges are limited from the start. Physical contact is eliminated. Even routine activities, showering, exercise, medical visits are tightly controlled and often conducted alone. Recreation, when allowed, may take place in small outdoor enclosures surrounded by concrete walls or steel fencing. The sky is visible, but unreachable. The space is designed to prevent interaction, not encourage movement. This is not incidental design. It is intentional. Every aspect of the environment reinforces separation. Over time, this separation alters perception. Without regular social interaction, people lose reference points for normal behavior. Emotional regulation becomes difficult. Small stressors feel overwhelming. Reactions intensify or disappear entirely. Some individuals become hyper-aware of every sound and movement. Others withdraw completely. Sleep patterns break down. Appetite fluctuates. Concentration deteriorates. The mind turns inward, often replaying memories or constructing narratives to fill the silence. In extreme cases, reality itself becomes unstable. And yet, these outcomes are often treated as individual failures rather than predictable responses to environmental conditions. Mental health care within these prisons is limited. Access to professionals may be delayed or restricted. Treatment often focuses on managing symptoms rather than addressing root causes. Medication replaces interaction. Containment replaces care. For many, requests for help are met with suspicion. Expressions of distress may be interpreted as manipulation or noncompliance. In some cases, seeking assistance results in further restrictions. The message is clear: adapt or endure. Family contact becomes strained. Phone calls are brief and monitored. Visits, if permitted, occur behind glass or through digital screens. Physical connection is eliminated. Over time, relationships erode. Loved ones struggle to maintain contact with someone who exists in a world defined by absence. Conversations become repetitive. News from the outside feels distant and abstract. Life continues without them. Inside, the environment remains unchanged. In the worst prisons, there are few opportunities for education, skill building, or meaningful activity. Programs that exist in lower security facilities are often unavailable. There is no group learning, no collaborative work. Rehabilitation exists in policy documents, but not in practice. The goal is not preparation for release. It is maintenance of order. This raises a fundamental question about sentencing itself. If punishment permanently damages the capacity to function, what happens when release becomes possible? How does someone transition from total control to complete autonomy? For many, the answer is simple: they do not. But this chapter only scratches the surface. Because beyond isolation and control lies an even harsher reality: prisons where neglect, violence, and systemic failure converge, creating environments where survival itself becomes uncertain. And those prisons still operate. In the worst American prisons, suffering is rarely loud. It does not always come from riots, fires, or dramatic confrontations. More often, it arrives quietly through delay, indifference, and systems designed to look functional while failing the people trapped inside them. This is where neglect becomes policy. In many of the most severe facilities, basic needs are technically acknowledged but practically inaccessible. Food is provided, but often inadequate in quality or quantity. Medical care exists, but is slow, limited, and reactive rather than preventative. Mental health services are listed on paper, yet functionally unreachable for those who need them most. The system does not openly deny care. It simply makes access nearly impossible. Requests for medical attention begin as written forms. Those forms may sit unanswered for days or weeks. When responses come, appointments are brief, rushed, and focused on minimizing liability rather than resolving issues. Pain is often dismissed. Symptoms are questioned. Complaints are interpreted as manipulation. For individuals in extreme confinement, even reaching medical staff requires layers of approval and security coordination. Missed appointments are common. Follow-ups are rare. Conditions worsen quietly. Chronic illnesses go untreated. Infections spread before intervention occurs. Injuries sustained during restraint or extraction procedures may never be properly examined. In some facilities, medical units are understaffed and overwhelmed. Personnel rotate frequently, limiting continuity of care. Records are fragmented. Accountability is diffuse. No one person is responsible, which means no one is truly accountable. mental health neglect is even more pronounced. Many of the worst prisons house a disproportionately high number of individuals with pre-existing mental health conditions. Extreme confinement exacerbates these conditions. Yet access to consistent psychological care remains minimal. Therapy sessions, when they occur, are brief and conducted through barriers. Confidentiality is compromised. Trust is impossible to establish. Expressions of distress are often reframed as behavioral issues. Anxiety becomes noncompliance. Depression becomes withdrawal. Psychosis becomes a security threat instead of treatment. Restrictions increase. This approach does not stabilize individuals, it accelerates deterioration. Self-harm becomes more likely in these environments. So does suicide. Internal reports repeatedly confirm elevated rates of both, yet structural change remains rare. Preventive measures focus on control rather than care. Cells may be stripped of personal items. Observation increases. Isolation deepens. The underlying causes remain unaddressed. Beyond neglect, violence operates as a constant and spoken presence. In the worst prisons, violence does not always come from prisoners toward one another. It often emerges through forceful compliance measures embedded into daily operations, cell extractions. Restraint chairs, chemical agents, and physical takedowns are normalized tools. Their use is justified through security language, even when applied to individuals experiencing mental health crises or medical emergencies. These incidents are documented internally. -1 internally, and rarely challenged externally, in facilities with limited oversight. Patterns emerge. Force becomes routine. Escalation becomes standard. De-escalation disappears. Prisoners learn quickly that resistance, verbal or otherwise, results in immediate consequences. Silence becomes a survival strategy. Fear replaces agency. Staff, operating under pressure and within rigid systems, are conditioned to prioritize compliance over comprehension. The environment trains everyone inside it to expect conflict rather than resolution. Over time, empathy erodes. This erosion is not accidental. High turnover rates, long shifts, and constant exposure to stress create conditions where emotional detachment becomes a coping mechanism. The system rewards efficiency, not compassion. In this context, neglect and violence reinforce one another. Those who deteriorate mentally are more likely to encounter force. Those who encounter force are more likely to deteriorate further. The cycle tightens. Oversight mechanisms that might interrupt this pattern are often weak or symbolic. Internal grievance systems exist, but filing complaints can result in retaliation or increased scrutiny. External investigations are rare and slow. By the time findings are released, the individuals involved may have been transferred, released, or died. Consequences, when they occur, are administrative. Policies may be adjusted, training modules updated, statements released. Daily reality remains unchanged. For those serving long sentences or life without parole, this environment becomes permanent. There is no incentive to invest in rehabilitation when release is not anticipated. Educational programs are minimal or non-existent. Vocational training is restricted. Opportunities for meaningful engagement disappear. Time becomes something to endure rather than use. For aging prisoners, conditions become even harsher. Facilities designed for control are not equipped for declining health. Mobility issues go unaccommodated. Chronic pain isn't treated. Assistive devices may be delayed or denied due to security concerns. Compassionate release exists in theory, but is rarely granted in practice. Bureaucratic hurdles, narrow eligibility criteria, and political resistance ensure that most die inside. Death, when it occurs, is processed administratively. Notifications are sent. Paperwork is filed. Operations continue. There is no pause. Families often learn of deaths after the fact, with limited explanation. Autopsies may be delayed. Records are difficult to obtain. Closure is elusive. This reality raises a critical issue. These prisons are not failing despite the system. They are functioning exactly as designed. Their purpose is not recovery. It is containment. Neglect reduces costs. Isolation reduces risk. Force ensures compliance. From an institutional perspective, the model works. From a human perspective, it destroys. What makes these prisons especially severe is the absence of meaningful alternatives. Transfers are rare. Appeals are slow. Legal challenges require resources most prisoners do not have. Once inside, escape from the conditions, not the sentence, is nearly impossible. This chapter reveals a system sustained by neglect, reinforced by violence, and protected by opacity. But there is one final layer still unexplored. Because beyond neglect and force lies something even more enduring: the aftermath, long-term consequences that extend beyond prison walls, affecting individuals, families, and society itself. And that is where this story leads next. The damage caused by the worst American prisons does not end at the gate. For those who survive long-term isolation, neglect, and systemic violence, release is not a return to normal life. It is an abrupt transfer from total control into a world that expects independence, stability, and social function, often immediately. The sentence continues, just without walls. Years spent in extreme confinement fundamentally alter how the brain processes reality. Simple decisions, what to eat, where to go, how to interact, can become overwhelming. The absence of structure creates anxiety rather than relief. Freedom feels unsafe. Former prisoners often describe the outside world as too loud, too fast, too unpredictable. Crowded spaces trigger panic. Sudden noises provoke fear responses. Eye contact feels threatening. These reactions are not signs of weakness. They are conditioned responses. The environments they were placed in trained their nervous systems to expect danger at all times. Hypervigilance became necessary for survival. Once outside, that vigilance has nowhere to go. Sleep disturbances are common. Chronic insomnia persists long after release. Nightmares replay confinement experiences repeatedly, reinforcing trauma. Emotional regulation is impaired. Small frustrations escalate quickly. Conversely, joy may feel muted or unreachable. Relationships suffer. Family members expect reunion and recovery. What they encounter instead is distance, irritability, and withdrawal. Loved ones struggle to understand why someone who is finally free seems disconnected. The prison remains present in behavior, in reactions, in silence. Employment becomes another barrier. Gaps in work history. Limited education opportunities inside extreme facilities. And the stigma of incarceration restrict options. For those who spent years without meaningful human interaction, workplace dynamics feel foreign and threatening. Failure compounds. Each setback reinforces a sense of inadequacy. Without consistent support, many retreat from society altogether. Some return to the only environment they understand: confinement. Recidivism statistics are often cited to justify harsh sentencing, but those numbers rarely account for the conditions that produce the outcomes. When individuals are released psychologically fractured, reintegration failure becomes predictable. The system frames this as personal responsibility. The reality is institutional consequence. For those never released, those serving life sentences or dying inside, the legacy of these prisons extends outward. Families carry unresolved grief. Children grow up without parents, often without explanation. Communities absorb the absence, the trauma, and the economic strain. The impact is generational. Public awareness remains limited because these prisons operate out of sight. They are geographically isolated, administratively shielded, and politically protected. The people inside lack platforms. Their experiences are filtered through official language and redacted reports. The narrative remains controlled. When reform efforts emerge, they face resistance. Isolation is defended as necessary. Neglect is framed as resource limitation. Violence is justified as security enforcement. Accountability is diffused. No single policy appears responsible because responsibility is spread across systems, agencies, and decades of precedent. This diffusion allows the worst prisons to persist. They do not exist because of failure. They exist because they are tolerated. Sentencing, in theory, is meant to balance accountability, deterrence, and rehabilitation. In practice, placement within the American prison system often undermines all three. Extreme confinement does not deter future harm. Neglect does not promote responsibility. Psychological destruction does not prepare anyone for return. What remains is punishment for its own sake, and punishment without purpose becomes cruelty. The question is not whether these prisons are harsh. The question is whether a society accepts environments that permanently damage human beings and then expects them to function as if nothing happened. Because once someone has been sentenced into the worst prisons in America, the sentence does not stay behind the walls. It follows them, in memory, in behavior, in silence, and for many, it lasts longer than any number written on paper.